Well, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, I wanted to just talk to you a minute today about stewardship. It's kind of that time of year where we start working on the ministry budget for the next year, and we invite folks to make financial commitments to the church. But what you probably noticed, I hope you've noticed, is that I'm not real into the like multi-week convince you that the church is a worthy charity for you to give to, wear you down over time, wear down your resistance, guilt you into giving. I'm just not real into that, to be honest. In fact, I think that that kind of model of generosity when it's applied to the church is inappropriate. I think that's actually more the world than it is generosity in the church. Because, the truth is, I don't really think I have to convince you that the work of the church is important, that what we do is important. I think we all understand that what we're doing here is about the care of and the saving of eternal souls, right? I think that we all get that we are representing the King of the universe, that we belong to Him, and that we are sharing the hope of the world with people, who is Jesus Christ. And when we're talking about generosity in the church, what we're talking about is not me convincing you to give a portion of what is yours, or me being convinced to give a portion of what belongs to me. When we're talking about generosity in the church, what we're actually talking about is coming under the lordship of Christ. If I say that Jesus is my Lord, then every part of my life is actually under His lordship. And that includes the whole of my finances. It's not just a portion of what I have that belongs to Him, that's under His management and His direction, but actually everything that I have. And so what I'd like to do is just quickly walk through God's instructions on money. This is like a couple of minutes crash course on the Lord's teaching on money, how He teaches us to handle what He's given us. And so first of all, kind of the bottom line of biblical generosity is the tithe. And we read in Malachi 3:10, and it's actually established far before that with Abraham, but we read here, Malachi 3:10, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, so there will be enough food in my temple, or there will be supply, other translations say. And that actually is reaffirmed by Jesus. He says in Luke chapter 11, verse 42, what sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. And so Jesus is saying, listen, you can't just be careful to tithe every little bit and then not love people and not love God and be devoted to God. You're kind of missing the point, Jesus says, if you do that. And so the Bible teaches us to tithe in the Old Testament. It's reaffirmed in the New. And we're even instructed as followers of Jesus to give above and beyond the tithe, that it's not the ceiling of our giving, it's kind of like the floor. And this is 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7, where we read, you must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. This is a collection that Paul has called for those who are in need in the Jerusalem church, and he's saying, you know what? Let the Lord speak to your heart. And as the Lord moves you, you give and give generously to this special need. And not only that, we're actually called under the Lordship of Christ to actually handle our money very responsibly toward Him. And part of that is the care of our families. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8 says, but those who won't care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than unbelievers. And so what we understand as we're handling money is that our responsibility is to use what God's given us to care for our families. But this one might actually surprise people, that part of the responsible handling of money is actually to handle part of it for our enjoyment. This is 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 17. Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. And I think sometimes we feel so guilty about money and about enjoying some of it, but the truth is that God actually provides for us, and part of that provision is for us to have some to enjoy. But also we read in the scriptures about the necessity and the responsible handling of money to save. Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." And so God instructs us to actually save. He instructs us to get out of debt and to stay out of debt. Proverbs 22:7, "Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant," or some translations say slave, "to the lender." And we read in the New Testament in Romans in chapter 13 and verse 8, "Owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another." Owe nothing to anyone. Now, I can tell you, Ashley and I, for 10 years or so, have been tithing to our church. And for the past 5-6 years, we've been getting more and more serious about following all of God's instructions, like around debt and responsible saving and so. And I can tell you that we have a personal testimony that what God says, and specifically here, what God says about money, is true. What we find is that when we handle money God's way, that we have peace and blessing that comes from Him. So here's what I'm asking you to do, is that as we're approaching November 18th, on that Sunday, we're going to bring in our commitment cards, bring them to the altar as an act of faith to God. What I'm asking is just simply this, that we would all take the next faithful step with God, whatever that is. If God is calling us to take the next step toward the tithe, that we would do that. If God's calling us to get out of debt so that we can have more of His peace in our lives, we can be more secure, right, following His ways, so that we can be more generous, that we would do that we would endeavor to get out of debt. But whatever it is that God is calling you to do, calling me to do as that next faithful step, let's endeavor to take that step together with the Lord. Thank you so much. Love you, and we'll see you on Sunday. God bless.